Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Hope you're enjoying the second day of the Singapore FinTech Festival 2020, COVID edition, actually. I'm Nigel, your moderator for today's panel. Just a note before we begin. Please enter all your questions in the Q&A panel. It should be on the right-hand side of the screen. We've allocated sufficient time for questions at the end with our panelists, speakers, mavens of the industry. Okay, so without further ado, let me begin. Today we have 4 mavens joining us to discuss about how can advancements in technology lead to digital transformation in the finance industry. Ultimately, this is giving us a peek at their vision of where the future of technology is heading for the finance industry. Okay, we have here Boon Hiong, Global Head of Deutsche Bank, Jyi-chen, for Executive Director of Standard Chartered Bank, Urs Sauer, co-chair of ISSA, International Securities Services Association, and the Swiss Stock Exchange. Finally, we have Vijak, Sethaput, IT Deputy Director of Bank of Thailand. Okay, Boon, you have the honors to start the self-introduction.
Thank you very much, Nigel, and good day, good morning, and good evening to everybody. My name is Boon. I'm based in Singapore, working for Deutsche Bank Securities Services. I'm responsible for securities market and technology advocacy. Thank you.
Jyi-chen, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hey, thank you, Nigel. And hi, everyone. My name is Jyi-chen. I'm also based in Singapore. I work for Standard Chartered, where I'm basically the head of product management for custody services within the the financing and security services division of Standard Chartered Bank.
Urs, would you like to go next in self-introduction?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on this panel. And as you can see out my window, I'm calling in from wintry Switzerland. I've been with SIX for the last 10 years, worked on the ISSA DLT working group for 4 to 5 years by now. Seen some interesting developments we're going to talk about. Thank you.
Finally, Vijak, would you like to do a self-introduction, please?
Hi, Swadee Khap. That's a Thai way of saying hello. I'm Vijak Sethaput. I was a senior developer on the project Intanon, which is a central bank digital currency from Thailand project. But right now I'm at the IT department doing this digital transformation for the bank.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone. Right now, let me do a brief context to the format. We have 4 leading questions to each of the panelists, to all the panelists. So at the end, we have a Q&A, and do please leave your questions and we'll get to them for the panelists to answer whatever burning questions you do have. Okay, so the first question, I think, let me begin. What is the status in our industry regarding distributed ledger technology, DLT, adoption? How do you see the industry adapting to a DLT ecosystem? Like, what do you think you'll be moving towards? Urs, would you like to start on this?
Sure, thank you. It's from the ISSA side actually a very pertinent question. We launched a questionnaire this spring and received answers back from close to 150 participants, large participants in our industry, really across the globe. A few things that we expected, a few things that we didn't. So DLT is still very high up in everybody's mind. That came through loud and clear. 2020 has left some marks as far as commitment of budget, because obviously with homework and so on, there was a little bit of a downward trend, but overall funds are being committed. And yet we see it very clearly, building a new ecosystem does take time. As we know, the current ecosystem we have has been built over many, many years. It does take time. We see that year over year, funds committed are plus 20%. We saw a few things that were very interesting and will be looked at in a follow-up. One of the things that astonished me was that our survey showed that DLT investments were largest in the Americas. I expected Asia to be there, and it's going to be interesting to hear from my other panelists what they think about that finding. And we also see, as I mentioned before, to build a new ecosystem takes time. We have just about 2 to 3% of all participants that are live with a solution, and nobody is live at scale yet. So that's where we're kind of are at. Industry is taking it very seriously. Industry is moving towards it, and it does take time and a lot of money. That will be my introduction to that.
Thank you. Anybody has any comments on DLT investment is the largest in the Americas?
Yeah, maybe if I can jump in, and I think it's also quite interesting that ISSA and actually I think the four commercial institutions or that are part of this panel are also all members of ISSA, including my firm as well. I think the first observation is probably Asia has also already a lot of DLT initiatives and touching multiple areas, right? So if you look at the last 3 to 4 years, there's definitely been an acceleration of adoption, or at least initiatives being started. In the securities world, I think ASX in Australia has been one of the first CSD to basically go into that space and looking at replacing their infrastructure with a DLT environment. Of course, in Singapore, Project Ubin has basically a front-to-back type of approach in terms of both addressing the digital cash side, but also looking at business use case of how to use that digital cash in the day-to-day environment in terms of interbank transfer, in terms of bond issuance settlement, and so on. More recently, I think the Hong Kong Exchange and the Stock Connect program has also announced accelerating their program around DLT infrastructure to facilitate and streamline the settlement of those Stock Connect instruments between Hong Kong and China marketplace. So those are just a few examples of Asia being actually very, very active and very successful in terms of launching DLT. From my perspective, I would say that we've reached past the stage of POCs. I think more and more firms are now comfortable with the technology. But to Urs' earlier point around, where does that lead us in terms of actual BAU and launching it commercially? I think it still ends up in terms of the actual use case and what is the edge, right? So besides the technical advancement of the solution, what is it that is it going to actually differentiate and brings as a benefit, whether it's about cost efficiency, whether it's about faster turnaround time, reducing costs, etc. So all those elements would need to actually become much clearer before actually there is a broader level of adoption.
Okay, thank you. That's very clear. Yes. So actually, it seems like it's quite on par as well, Asia and America.
Nigel, I would like to add to this, on the status of our industry regarding DLT adoption. So, we'll actually split up into 3 buckets, right? The first bucket is actually regulations. So, I think regulations, Switzerland has actually been leading the world in its blockchain law. And then, of course, right, other jurisdictions like Thailand. Thailand was also among the first with its digital assets, a decree. Japan, right, was working on the cryptocurrency. And then after that, they went into, ICOs and how to deal with it. And followed by Singapore and a number of countries as well and jurisdictions. So I think from a DLT perspective and picking out on something that Urs has mentioned, right, the ecosystem. I think the ecosystem would include also regulation and regulatory framework that makes, right, the certainty of how do you actually use DLT and its benefits, right, in real life application. So regulations. I think in US. There have been at least from observations, right, they've been really much more focused, at least at in the US, right, the regulatory development has been at the state level, not at the federal level, right? So of course, we hear that there are movements and calls, right, for federal level review of a blockchain to have a US strategy, but that's I guess still in the process. So that's one bucket. The other two buckets actually the creation of digital assets. Digital assets, I think like tokenization and the use cases and things like that. That's where the industry is right now at. How do I actually, or how does the industry actually use the characteristics of DLT, right, to fit into very much useful use cases to solve very practical problems, but at the same time as well, right, not falling into the old paradigm of technology, but using the DLT technology paradigm. And then what's the DLT paradigm, right? It's like the immutability, the concurrent communication, the precision from smart contract, that sort of thing. So we see that actually progressing quite strongly. And finally, on the workflow, DLT, as a workflow tool, and this is where just to amplify again the points from Jyi-chen, the work done by Hong Kong Stock Exchange with Synapse, Japan Stock Exchange is actually experimenting as well for industry utility using DLT and of course ASX. So thank you.
Thank you, Boon. Vijak, do you have any comments on the question as well?
Yes, I agree with our other panelists. I think not just DLT, I think anything digital these days get a wider adoption because I think maybe this year we have to talk about this, right? Because the COVID pandemic also kind of forced us to become more digital because we cannot get in the social distancing and all that measures. So I think anything digital now got a lot wider adoption, especially the DLT. I think as the panelists has said, in Thailand we have a pretty good sort of regulatory framework. We have a law that's kind of setting up the industry. So we see a lot of adoption, and we see a lot of new players and new company that sort of move into this space. And we also see adoption in not just the financial sector. I think in government, we saw a lot of system coming out. This past couple of days, the custom department just said they're going to use blockchain to kind of control the custom better. So I think the digital, anything digital got wider adoption because of the pandemic, and also the DLT is got a lot of attention because we want to get the trusted ledger. So anything that include ledgers that need to be trusted, then they're gonna look into DLT as a solution for the problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nigel, can I just add on to just now my how should I say my comments, right? That actually in US there's an emergence of a really interesting operating model as well. So looking at DTCC and its collaboration with Paxos settlement system, I think it sets up a really how should I say a leading edge type of operating model that could be really useful for the industry. And of course, right, DTCC as is Project Whitney and Project Ion as well, looking to see how you can actually use DLT into the capital market space. And noting that well, US market is a huge market, right? So that is going to be really very significant.
Thank you. It's
And if I can, I was going to add also, I mean, and rebounding on what Boon said earlier, right? I think also the DLT technology has allowed us to actually shift or a little bit our mindset in terms of looking at the same type of old problems that we all deal with in our day-to-day environment when it comes to the securities industry, but leveraging the new technology to look at it in a different way. And what I see as a shift, and all those initiatives are very common in nature, is the fact that we are moving away from the traditional transactional messaging, where basically each party is sending a transaction, a instruction to another party, that other party has to reconcile, has to send it to another party, and so on and so on, and moving into a completely different model, which is about sharing in a distributed way the information, and then managing the authorization in a trusted way, so that even though you still may have a private DLT that needs a certain level of security and trust between members, but once that trust is established, then you can establish a better peer-to-peer trust, as opposed to some of the traditional models that we see in the securities and the securities world. So I think that mindset has started to shift. It took probably 3-4 years before everybody could actually sink in that business benefit, and hopefully that would then drive the next stage of a DLT adoption as well.
Thank you. I guess just to conclude this question, it seems like there's no doubt everyone is looking towards DLT as a solution. It's just mainly on few things that we've mentioned: regulations, use case, workflow. How can we tie it back to the old world, and how can we gain adoption in doing so? And I think leading on to the second question is that there's no, I think this is the most important kind of currency. It's a digital currency, and I think this will have the highest adoption if it comes out. So the question is, the emergence of a central bank digital currency, what do you think of the impact of CBDCs? Let's start with the financial sector. What do you think of the impact of CBDCs in the financial sector? Yeah, actually, can we have Kun Vijak to start with this?
Okay.
Bank of Thailand.
Thank you, Nigel. As one who doing this central bank digital currency for the last 2 years, for us, I think if you said 2019 is the year of private stablecoin, I think 2020 would be the year I could probably claim that it's the year for the central bank digital currency, because from the latest survey by BAS, we saw the increase of the number of the central bank around the world that sort of interested in this space, or they have some project that are sort of looking into this. Because I think because of 2-3 things. The first is I think the central bank now see the potential of this technology that can improve our financial infrastructure. The second one is because the level or the size of this market or the size of this activity is huge. Starting from like Facebook want to jump in, and now the China, the PBOC, the Central Bank of China, is kind of introducing, testing the digital yuan. I think now people around the world is getting interested in this central bank digital currency, because I think they have a lot of potential to really improve the efficiency in the financial infrastructure, because it's just the money. Like the money that we have nowadays, it's just piece of paper, and we have some system that sort of manage it. But if we put it into this digital currency, one of the thing that we theorize is it can be programmable. It can be programmable to execute smart contract, things like that. So I think the benefit of this is huge, and it can improve efficiency in our system a lot, and also can create a new innovation, new types of business that can expand this a lot. But in saying that, I think this is coming with the risk and the complication that it's just not the technology itself. I think the technology is have their problems, but in terms of the central bank digital currency, I think that it involves a lot more than just technology. And in technology, we may be debating whether it's DLT or not, things like that. But in central bank digital currency, we have to also concern with the risk and the financial stability. If we issue that kind of currency out, it's become digital. And we have to think about how to safely execute this smart contract, or how can we prevent the risk that it can create. So I think it's more than just technology. It will involve other parts, law, economics, macroeconomics, financial stability. So I think this very interesting to see when the central bank start to roll this out, to see how he can handle this kind of problem.
I think from my side, I totally agree. CBDC, if you would have told me 2 years ago, it would have moved as fast as it did, I would have said, nah, not going to happen. But something that really astonished me recently was the different tacks that are being taken even by Western central banks. We have the Swiss central bank, the Swiss National Bank, that did a successful test together with SIX of wholesale CBDC. And just about a week before that was announced, ECB said at a ICMA event that they are focusing more on retail CBDC. So I think that just to me tells me that the central banks are very much looking at that, but which way that is really going to go and how we're going to do it, because it brings a lot of questions for the central banks. Are they happy with somebody holding their central bank money that is not on their RTGS system? And then, so it brings up a lot of questions, and the path forward is not clear to me yet.
Yeah, and I was going to add, like, looking back at what we did collectively at ISSA and you know, under the working group that Urs is co-chairing, right? I mean, last year the focus on the DLT working group of ISSA was really around coming up with the overall concept paper and you know, overall DLT and digital currency. And if I remember, CBDC was just maybe one sub-chapter in the settlement section of the overall DLT. And look at us today, we are forming a new working group, a sub-working group within the DLT working group to specifically focus on CBDC and to ask some of those questions. I mean, obviously from our perspective, we're probably going to be looking more at the wholesale use case of CBDC in the context of security settlement or financing and so on. But clearly, I agree with your point also in terms of you know, the retail use case, and you can see also China. I think the case for the digital renminbi is much more on the retail side. When you look at the Singapore project, that's definitely wholesale. So I think that the two are there, and it's going to be also this element about you know, commercial stable coin versus central bank backed CBDCs, and I think those type of things will continue to emerge. But from my perspective, I'm especially you know, interested in the development of the cross-border wholesale scenarios for CBDC, because there is definitely a potential there to again help with the overall improvement of the cross-border settlement. You know, for those of us that are actively involved in day-to-day BAU settlement activities, we all know how painful it is, for instance, for an Asian investor trying to settle a US equity just because of time zone differences, because of public holidays, times differences, and so on. So hopefully maybe with a smart contract, with a 24/7 DLT environment, and with the availability of a CBDC that is injected in that ecosystem, you would be able then to remove some of those inherent traditional challenges that you have today when you're trying to settle, you know, out of SGD, a US dollar trade. So that to me is definitely one appeal that CBDC could bring, and at the same time bring the comfort of a central bank backed digital asset as opposed to just a commercially backed stable coin.
Yeah. I think, you know, I agree with all the points. I think, you know, we're moving into an era, starting an era of central bank digital currency. The retail use case for central bank digital currency seems to be stronger, at least at this point in time, for the versus, right, you know, a CBDC in the capital market space, right? So, you know, in the retail space, And this will actually be also driven by specific countries' characteristics and use case. And so, we could see it, for example, in countries whereby there's actually a very high adoption of fintech payment methods, right? There's a immobilization of bills of central bank money of M0, and therefore, right, there's this use case for the central bank to reintroduce its central bank trust in the digital land. So that's one thing. From the capital market side, right, and that's something that we are still trying to learn more and to discuss, right, and especially with the expertise represented by ISSA and the central bank's experts, is that the settlement mechanism for the cash lake in the public security space, right, is actually pretty well developed, and the public securities like equities that's listed in the stock exchange, right, they are not tokenized yet, and therefore it actually works. Where, right, assets, securities is slowly being tokenized is actually in the private security space, with debt and everything else. And with that, that's where people are talking about T+0 settlement, and then greater efficiency that needs to be matched by the cash lake. But the cash lake in the private security space, right, is, could it be represented by a Cbdc, or, is it better represented by a commercial bank issued stablecoin that, Jyi-chen has actually raised as well. So it seems almost like there's a two-track development, right? Digital assets development, which requires central bank, digital currency, which is really important. But the digital assets development is actually in the private sector, in the private security space, not in the public security space. Whereas, right, for Cbdc, right, if it gets developed, it actually wholesale for capital markets is better suited for a public security space that is not yet tokenized, rather than the private security space. So that's where we see that different starting point. At some point in time, the twain will meet. But in this transition period, right, I think a number of really interesting operating model could come out. Thank you. And of course, right, sorry, just to add, on the operating model, I think it will be really interesting to see whether if leading stock exchanges like SIX, right, could actually eventually be also intermediating the digital cash lake that their project with the Central Bank of Switzerland, project Helvetia, sorry if I pronounced wrongly, if this actually indicates the direction that in a digital land with a digital venue, whereby you have digital assets, can that regulated platform also be intermediating the digital cash on the same platform? I think that would really be interesting.
I think actually it will, in the end, for these platforms to be successful, we need to have the ability to settle in central bank money, because otherwise your participants, higher capital requirements and so that's going to be one of the drivers. And yeah, to me, it's just really interesting to see how countries that already have like a beneficial owner set up within the CSDs obviously are looking more at the retail space. And the one that stands out there is ECB, that is looking at the retail space, even though we're clearly in Europe, we're an omnibus account set up for the whole settlement. So it's fascinating. To me, it's really fascinating to look at it, to see where this is going and how we can help shape it. Obviously, that's the other big goal.
Yeah, because I think eventually that will be the whole integration, interoperability, right, between CBDCs, but to Boon's earlier point, between CBDCs and traditional world, traditional security, traditional cash. So is this going to be a new FX market? Is this going to be a completely different model? So I think time will tell. But that's, again, one of the reasons why the industry collaboration through industry association like ISSA is going to be quite important, so that we can actually define common ways of achieving and harmonizing some of those approaches, to avoid ending up with a multitude of bilateral type of models that will work on its own but will not be actually gaining traction because of not having that element of size and element of ecosystem that allows everybody to play into it. I think that is something that I think the industry has to be cautious about, in making sure that they put some of those guiding principles and guiding framework ahead of actual broader adoption.
Okay, thank you. I'm just curious. Maybe I can just take a quick poll here for all the panelists. which one would you want to see first? I mean, in a personal capacity, wholesale CBDC or retail CBDC?
I would love to see wholesale first. Just looking at my current employer, which is SIX, and obviously we're building a platform, and to have a wholesale CBDC on there would be really great advantage and would work really well.
Yeah, I mean, same for me, as I mentioned in my intro. I mean, on this question, I think from a personal perspective, yes, the wholesale scenario is more appealing to me right now. Yeah.
I think, sorry, Kun Vijak, would like to go first?
Sure. I would go for the wholesale CBDC also. I think because we started studying on this topic, and we start with the wholesale, and we got quite a very good understanding of things. But in the retail space, I think it's just many parameters or many things that would involve for it to be successful. So I think I would probably, because the thing that we did, I did it's a wholesale CBDC. So I hope to see that first.
Boon?
Okay, I'm trying to make up my mind because the way I look at it, right, is that retail CBDC in the end shouldn't it also flow into a central bank, in a form of liability, and then as a result becomes a central bank CBDC, right? What I mean is this: let's say, right, I'm a retail investor now, and I'm using Singapore dollar CBDC. And I'm going to transfer my Singapore dollar CBDC to my local broker to buy SING shares, Singapore Telecom shares. When does this then become a retail CBDC? When does this transform from a retail CBDC to a wholesale CBDC? Because I'm actually going to use my Sing dollar CBDC, right, for settlement to buy Singtel share. So that's something that's been on my mind, right? Second one is also on the internationalization of RMB. Let's just say, right, in few years' time, when the digital RMB has been introduced, I think they are talking about introducing in 2021, 2022, right? And then it starts, and it's on tokenized form. So it's not an account based, but it's actually tokenized form. And which means to say, right, how would that mean for RMB liquidity pool, let's say in Hong Kong and in Singapore? What does that mean, to issue a dim sum bond in Hong Kong and then to raise RMB? Would that be in, is there a difference in RMB if that's the case, right? By raising the RMB in Hong Kong through the means, given that, we have to remember RMB internationalization started from Hong Kong, really started because, right, renminbi from a retail and tourist spending first brought renminbi into Hong Kong, and then from there, right, it builds up the Hong Kong, the offshore RMB pool in Hong Kong, which then led to the ability to create and settle to create RMB denominated products and to settle in RMB. So I seek to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you for all your answers. I mean, I think personally mine is retail, just because I don't know what will happen with retail. The opportunity is quite endless, it seems like it. And on this part, when you have endless opportunities, the third question is quite related, is that how can you create this new opportunity? So how is your firm part of innovation in the market? Do you see any upcoming growth solutions that can change the market landscape? Where is the future of technology heading towards? Boon, would you like to start on this?
Thank you. I think this is actually a very big question, right? So let me break it down a bit. Innovation in the market. I think we have heard from my fellow panelists, right? Is that, hey, is there things that you can do more effectively? Is there things that you can do more efficiently from the existing way of doing things? So Jyi-chen was talking about, hey, a shift in paradigm, right, from sequential to maybe more concurrent shared basis of doing things. So that's already in itself, right, an innovation in progress. And then, at the same time as well, to do things that's totally new. So, for example, I think, in the discussion with in Cbdc by Urs and by Vijak, right, on how we could actually change the paradigm. So on this note, I think how my firm is trying to remain abreast with all this innovative dynamics, right, is to really understand what they mean and how they could evolve, and then from a practical aspect as well, to see how we can start solving some of our clients' issues. So, for example, right, non-DLT related, but in artificial intelligence, how can we better identify failed settlement situation, or if we could use a real-time information together with API, right, in order to concurrently with Symphony, right? So API is a one-to-one relationship, so you extract the real-time information, and then from there, right, you pump it into Symphony for concurrent communication, which kind of like is a proxy for DLT, but without the concern, I won't say concern factor, but the adoption factor of DLT is like, oh, am I ready for DLT? But if we talk about API and Symphony and real time, I think there's a lesser level of there's a higher level of understanding, and then of course, right, to use it to solve client communication as well as time sensitive situation requirements. And in the DLT space, looking at digital asset, how it changes workflow, roles, and then tokenization effect. And in Europe, for example, my firm is looking into using DLT to solve for the beneficial ownership identity requirements. So kind of like a answer that I would like to sharpen up by saying that innovation to us is like, how do you do things differently? How do you do things more effectively? How do you do things more efficiently? And then from there, right, we are staying close to developments in AI, in API, as well as in DLT. Very similar, I think, to what a lot of people are doing in the industry.
Thank you. Jyi-chen, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to add, and I echo what Boon just shared. I think there are so many different things that firms and all the firms, right? So it's not just one or the other, but basically, if you look at the non-DLT space, the API, I mean, I think the pure technologists would argue that API is not new. But I think it's just one of the latest trends in the banking industry, where API becomes much more attractive these days, again, compared to the traditional way of sending messages in a sequential way, because it gives much more power to the consumer to retrieve information that they want, as opposed to be dependent on receiving something from their service provider at the time when the service provider decides to send that information. So I think that's, again, quite a shift in terms of the benefit of an API. Clearly, we talked a lot already around, improving existing services, addressing existing pain points with the new technology. So I won't spend too much time on that. But I would mention that, of course, we're also exploring new business cases. So tokenization, I think a lot of people would say this is new, this is the future. Absolutely, but to some extent, it's also an old concept. It's a securitization of an instrument that may not have been appealable in the current environment. If those underlyings wanted to be listed on a traditional exchange, maybe that wouldn't help. But with the new technology, with the promise of being more efficient, cheaper, faster, etc., then suddenly that becomes a viable business case, and that's why we're clearly exploring that, because it also adds another element that I think regulators are also quite, and I think Vijak mentioned about that, right? About inclusiveness, accessibility. So if you can tokenize an illiquid bond and make it into a smaller fraction, something that is more accessible to smaller investor, to some extent, you're also helping that overall agenda of inclusiveness. So that's another element that we're looking. And then I guess the other element is the whole thing around crypto, right? The pure cryptocurrency, the Bitcoin. If you look at the conversation 2 or 3 years ago, all the institutional investors in the banks were saying, no, Bitcoin is a big no. If you read the press now, you've got more and more traditional asset managers, hedge funds, obviously those that are more geared into taking risk, but they are definitely willing to go into that. So we are also looking at, together with our SC Venture units, looking at how we could actually provide some solutions around crypto, leveraging on the traditional experience that we have as a custodian in the traditional space. Because eventually there is also an element of, regulators will eventually step in, and we can see them stepping in already, but there would, in my view, there would be more and more regulations as and when that becomes a bigger market with a bigger exposure to retail investors, and there will be a bigger need for protecting the interest of those investors as well.
Thank you, Jyi-chen. Vijak, would you like to take the next one? The same one?
Yeah, same one. I think one of the things as a central bank that we can help further this industry along is we can bring in the banking and the kind of the old players to get on board on this study with us. For example, in our internal project, which is wholesale Cbdc, we got a collaboration with 8 banks, 8 big banks in Thailand to help us understand this better. So I think one of the things that we could bring to the table is ability to kind of organize the group together to embark on this journey together.
I mean, from my side, putting on my SIX hat for a minute, it's clear. I mean, SIX has made an enormous step by saying we're building up a second completely new financial market infrastructure based on DLT, yeah, which is in its stages of going live in 2021. And it wants to be, and it will be, a fully regulated space. So that's with the goal what Jyi-chen also mentioned before, you need a regulated space to attract the institutional money, because they need a regulated space to be going there. So there it's clear. I mean, we're taking it very seriously, and we want to be leading the pack, which comes with all the problems and everything else with it. But till now, we're moving. And if we look at it now from the ISSA side, I mean, it's really interesting to see. Jyi-chen mentioned ASX before. That's one way of going. It's replacing your old system with a new system, which is always a big task, as we all know. Then you have DTCC as another big one out there that is looking in certain areas. What can DLT, for example, bring to improve that part? You have the SIX side, building up something new. You have Clearstream that looks more at the collateral space. So it shows that the industry is taking it seriously, is looking at it, but DLT is here to stay and will shape how we interact. And just to put a final space on it, I once worked in corporate actions. I mean, to have a dream that everybody's sitting on the same data and you're not sitting on a tender offer that is wrong in your system and you realize it 6 months later, is a dream that this technology might bring to you.
Thank you. I mean, just to summarize this, is everybody is clear on your progress and roadmap, especially when we are leaving 2020 and moving on to 2021. And it seems like everyone on this panel are DLT experts. So actually, this is the next question, is that as DLT experts, right? What is the most common question you have been asked on DLT, and what would you like to say about it? You know, so that when you say to the audience, so you will never have to answer it again. Jyi-chen?
Yeah, so probably the question we've been asked, and actually connecting back again to ISSA and the work that ISSA done, the original paper that we've done was around whether or not DLT was going to completely disrupt the traditional banking space, the traditional custodian role, the CSD role. And so, over the last few years, there's always been a question around, with DLT, with atomic swap, with real-time settlement, with peer-to-peer connection between investors, etc. What is still the role of CSDs and custodian? And I think today's composition of the panel is a good illustration that actually there is still a role for a lot of the traditional players. It's probably less a disruption and more like an evolution. Yes, we're talking about new technology. We're talking about possibly new asset class, new form of currencies, new infrastructure, new ecosystem. But when you look back beyond those new elements, the fundamental in the back is still the same to me. It's about building trust. It's about building safekeeping. It's building protection. And therefore, you still need the experience of, you know, a CSD, an exchange, a banking institution, a central bank, and so on, to bring that element, those old school elements that will still be fundamental in this new environment. But at the same time, of course, you cannot stay still, and you have to continue to partner and look at new technologies. Like, and I think all the examples that my fellow panelists have shared are a good illustration that everybody's looking at it, and everybody's looking at or finding cases that can actually you know, move the overall agenda. And so to me, I think hopefully we won't have to answer that question anymore, because there is a clear signal that the successful POCs and the successful business case actually sees a contribution from multiple parties. You've got fintechs, you've got new technology providers, but they are partnering with industries experts to make sure that eventually it's not just a technology solution, but it's actually a business solution that makes a difference to the broader community.
Thank you, Jyi-chen. Anybody has been asked a lot of common questions on DLT?
Oh, I have one. People always ask me whether the central bank digital currency have to use DLT or not. Some ask whether this have to be DLT or because DLT have all this trust in the trustless environment, guarantee and all that stuff, good stuff. But they also have maybe some performance or scalability problem. So some people propose that well, we're not going to use the DLT for central bank digital currency. But I think this is a common question. But I think we approach it on a different angle. We look at what we need from the central bank digital currency, and if DLT is sort of solve that problem, we use it. But if DLT is not, then we use some other methods to kind of help. So I think we should sort of look in terms of the functionality or things that we need from Cbdc. Not asking whether this Cbdc going to be using DLT or not. I think that's my kind of my take. Yeah.
Understood. Boon, Urs, do you guys get any common questions on DLT as well?
Urs, would you like to go first?
Sure. I mean, from our side, it's obvious it's the question that Jyi-chen already brought up, that we brought up with ISSA in the beginning. Hey, will it still need a CSD? Will it need roles? And it's interesting because I'm a strong believer. Yes, it will. Be it from the regulatory side, that somebody stands there to guarantee to the public that what's being traded and what's being handled is actually there. And what we have to look at as an industry is that roles will be changing. New roles will be coming up. Old roles might disappear, might move further back, and it will require quite a bit of flexibility to really look at this technology. How do you set it up right? And that goes back to what I said in the beginning. That's the challenge of it. How do you build the ecosystem here? If the parties don't yet know exactly what their roles will be and how it will shape out. And that's where it's important that solutions are going live in a controlled way, and we will learn from it and move on forward. And to you, Boon.
Yep, I don't really have anything new to add, but to echo what everybody has said, that these are some of the really regular questions that we face. I think if I have to rank, right, one of the top three will be, oh, will my role go away? And that sort of things. And I fully subscribe as well to what Urs has said, that well, things will change, but in an evolutionary way. And this is where, right, investigation happens now, so that we can prepare for the day whereby we can see that, hey, things are really changing, so that we have been prepared for those changes. Thanks.
Thank you. I think let me just go quickly run through some of the questions. We have about 2 here because I think people are sick of my questions. Let me just quickly briefly run through this. All right. Okay, the first question we have here is an interesting one. Is that when do you think we will see the first Cbdc issued and used as a medium of transfer? Yeah, does anybody want to take a stab at this?
I will try, and then well, so many. Okay, so maybe I should I'll mute myself.
No, I'm just like, this is a very difficult question to answer because obviously that's the realm of the central banks, and we see that they are experimenting a lot, and we see, however, also that the cautious statements are coming out that, hey, we need to fully understand this before it goes. So I don't want to put out a year or a number by when the Cbdc will be live. I mean, we can look at China in the retail Cbdc, seems to be pretty much quickly becoming a reality. But how successful it is very hard to judge from here.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was going to add that. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball, but I think if you observe the acceleration around consultation, the acceleration around papers, whether it's from industry association, whether it's coming from regulators, from central banks, etc., clearly you can see an acceleration of the Cbdc's agenda. But as we mentioned before, there are so many different cases, whether it's retail, whether it's wholesale, and within retail, within wholesale, there are substreams of use case, etc. So it's hard to tell, but yeah, it's probably going to come sooner than one would have expected maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think this is a tough one because I think most central banks are very conservative in the sense that we also worry about the risk of introducing new things. So I think most central bank now is kind of in the research mode and try to look at this in different angles, not just the technology part, as I said. So it really gonna be very hard for me to put the time frame into it. But as everybody said in this panel, I think this is accelerated from a couple years back. So we'll see when this is going to be reality.
Yeah, and I think it also depends on what exactly is a if we take a loose definition of a Cbdc, right? Then we can say that, hey, the island of Bahamas has issued its $10. And then, Cambodia in Asia, right, has also, used a quasi DLT system for its central bank payment infrastructure. And of course, right, China's experiment in retail Cbdc. So we could actually then say that, well, if we take a loose definition at this point in time, right, it's already happening in small scale, even as, right, the bigger effort is on research and on understanding the implications. So it's here to come.
Definitely. So everybody agrees that it's coming, just that we don't know when it will be more mainstream. Thank you. And okay, okay, so we have 2 more questions. Okay, so the next one is that, is it possible to share recent issuers that have adopted DLT in their issuance, just for case study purposes? Let me just copy this in. So the question is it possible to share recent issuers that have adopted DLT in their issuance? Yep. Anybody would like to take a stab at this?
I can take a first step at it, but I'm not. I mean,
without naming names. I mean, obviously in Singapore, again, related to Project Ruby, there was an issuance of bonds, right? And I guess STACS was also involved in some of those initiatives. So that definitely there are cases like that. I think from the security side, it's probably less. I mean, the more I hear is more about bonds issuance these days. But yeah, I think it's probably going to be difficult just to name individuals or individual instruments in this particular panel.
Fully agree with Jyi-chen. I wouldn't want to do it because it would be maybe not fully accurate, but we saw some real effort going on in France and in Germany, and some parts out of South America. So there is stuff going on, but I wouldn't want to name names either. I would not want to name names.
Yeah, you can search in Thailand. we got many study project, and actually we got one that's just kind of went live this year. It's about the bond issuance, but not like it's a kind of hybrid system. But if you're interested in, we have many blockchain or DLT project in Thailand. Maybe search Google for blockchain in Thailand. You get plenty of use case that we are experimenting.
Well, I'm going to, how should I say, name names, because this is public, right? So, the Thailand 1 baht bond, that has been a phenomenal success. So that's issued by, I think, is a government issue, right? Then the other
yes,
one.
the Thai government, yeah.
Yeah. And then the other one, of course, is the Philippines as well, digital bond. There's also a hybrid that was issued to retail and settled using a bank-issued stable coin. So yeah, if you're looking for real cases of, hey, is this happening? So immediately, right, we can say that the public sector is really on board using DLT to issue bonds for retail financial inclusion purposes.
Thank you. You heard it from them. Do your own research as well. But those that are publicly listed, it's all over the internet as well. Okay, we have one last one before we hit the time frame as well, is how will banks' operating models change with tokenization and blockchain? So it's quite similar to what we've discussed earlier, some of your points. How will the bank's operating models change with tokenization and blockchain? Efficiency, innovation, effectiveness. I guess maybe anybody want to add more color to this question?
Maybe if I can go first. I think it's going to be the integration, right? So I don't think it's going to be, again, a dinosaur type of scenario where suddenly overnight, the old security, the old bonds disappear and everything goes into a DLT environment. So I think what's going to be probably the biggest value add and challenge at the same time is how do you integrate and provide a hybrid model where you can actually give access to your customers, access to both sides, right? So digital assets, crypto, traditional assets, and integrate and interoperate those different environments. And if you make an analogy, it's the same as, as a global custodian, you offer access to multiple markets, which have different market infrastructure that may operate under a different technology or different, peer-to-peer connectivity and so on. So I think the next level of challenge would be for us to be able to then support all those new marketplaces to support those underlying markets and underlying new asset class as well.
And then, to add to what Jyi-chen has shared, right? If let's say we take again, right, the two streams. So first is the DLT effect on workflow. That could actually involve, right, a different skill set than if DLT is used for tokenization of assets. So just take this scenario whereby, in the custodian space, a smart contract can automate asset servicing. What does this mean immediately? It means that whoever who is actually programming the smart contract needs to be able to program a smart contract and needs to know the domain knowledge as well of asset servicing. Immediately, right, this actually says that, you need a multidisciplinary team that can combine, right, the respective domain knowledge in order to put this thing together. So, it can no longer be, okay, you're IT and business, and therefore, right, again, the design of the work goes sequentially. So therefore, right, this could actually DLT could actually push, right, towards the creation of a multidisciplinary team that combines all the necessary relevant skills in order to create value for the clients.
Okay, let me just conclude this. Panelists, please stay back as I conclude this panel discussion. Thank you everyone for attending this year's Singapore FinTech Festival and our STACS Showcase panel discussion with our panelists here. Please do give a virtual clap to all the 4 panelists, Boon, Jyi-chen, Urs, and Kun Vijak. And if you do have any questions, you may contact them on LinkedIn, or you can also email through info@stacs.io. Okay, and thank you for all your questions and your participation. Hope you stay safe.